For the next few videos, I want to discuss the history, culture, and current state of the Pine Barrens. Some will be fun, some controversial, but this will be a brief explainer on what the Pine Barrens is and who lives here. So, what is the Pine Barrens? During the last ice age, much of North America was covered in massive glaciers. In New Jersey, they went as far south as Metuchen and the Raritan River. In periods of glacial minimum, much of South Jersey was underwater. But during glacial maximums, the area south of the glaciers was brutal. Extreme winds coming off the glaciers kept the region freezing cold and dry. These winds helped break down the soil into fine sugar sand and created the modern landscape of dunes. Fast forward and the glaciers melt, creating the Delaware, Raritan, and Hudson rivers, and life begins to take hold in the region. Geographically, there are a few ways to define the Pine Barrens. The first is the Pinelands National Reserve. This is the area delineated by the federal government to be protected for future generations. Second are the boundaries of the Pinelands Commission, the state agency dedicated to the planning of the Pine Barrens. These two boundaries have a lot of commonality, but there are also some areas that are included in one but not the other, often resulting from political shenanigans. Third is the most generous, the Atlantic Coastal Plain. Not all of this land is currently Pine Barrens. Much of it has been developed into towns and farms, but historically, at its greatest extent, this was the Pine Barrens. Personally, I'd say there are places on the coastal plain that haven't been Pine Barrens in at least a century, but there are also places outside the state and national designated boundaries that definitely are Pine Barrens today. So what lives here? For plants, this includes pines, oaks, cedars, blueberries, cranberries, and tea berries. For animals, this means mammals like deer, otters, and bears. Reptiles like turtles, frogs, and snakes. Birds like the passenger pigeon and Carolina parakeet. And today, most of these animals are locally endangered or extinct. Then came the humans. First, the Lenape. The Lenape are an Algonquian-speaking nation indigenous to the mid-Atlantic. But through centuries of displacement, they can now be found in Canada, the Midwest, and Oklahoma. Let's dispel some misconceptions. The Pine Barrens is not primeval wilderness. Its trees are not ancient, and it hasn't been untouched by humans since people first walked across Beringia. The Lenape had farms, they hunted, and like many people today, they spent their summers down the shore fishing, crabbing, and harvesting clams. They used prescribed burns to manage both their farms and their hunting grounds, while also introducing non-native crops like the Three Sisters, tomatoes, peppers, and yucca. Next, we have the colonials. As far as the Pine Barrens are concerned, the first Europeans to settle here were Swedish Finns and Estonians, followed by English Quakers. On the plus side, they brought log cabins, cheap furniture, and conceptions of religious tolerance. On the downside, they brought diseases like smallpox and Protestantism. Next, we have Africans. The Swedes and Quakers didn't keep many slaves. The number wasn't zero, but it was much less than the Dutch, Anglicans, and Puritans who colonized other parts of the state. Much like New York, New Jersey had a slow process of abolition, and was the last quote-unquote free state to abolish slavery. At the same time, the isolation of the Pine Barrens made it a popular stop along the Underground Railroad. Next were the successive waves of immigrants during the 18th and 19th centuries. Towns like Vineland and Hamilton were built along rail lines to attract Italian immigrants to work in their vineyards. German immigrants settled places like Pomona, Cologne, and Germania, as their native Brandenburg had similar soil conditions to the Pine Barrens. While today, Lakewood may be known for its large Hasidic Jewish community, it was originally a Russian settlement, along with New Kuban. At the same time, Mizpah, Alliance, and New Hebron were the historic Jewish communities. This cultural diversity continues to this day, with communities from every country in Latin America, as well as places like Vietnam, India, and the Middle East, settling in this region. So, who are the Pineys? They all are. If this is a melting pot, then some cheese melts faster than others. There are multiple ways of being a Piney that are influenced by these cultures and don't always fold nicely into the city-country Republican-Democrat paradigm. Consider this Jeff Foxworthy's "You might be a Piney if you make or drink blueberry wine or grow your own weed." You hunt or feed wildlife in the Pine Barrens. You hike or camp along the Batona Trail. You and your friends trespass at sand quarries to dirt bike, go sledding, or drown. You or someone you know has a Jersey Devil story. You or someone you know had a Wicca phase. These aren't exclusive to the Pine Barrens, nor is it an exhaustive list, but they are common piney things. In the early days of colonization, Pineys primarily worked in shipbuilding as well as the production of pitch and charcoal. Since Europeans arrived, the Pine Barrens have been deforested multiple times. Then the economy shifted to the production of glass and iron. Then, agriculture and tourism. In the 1960s, the state and federal government started to protect the pinelands, creating the paradigm that we know today. But that's for a future video. Over the centuries, Pineys and the Pine Barrens have cultivated a reputation for being a refuge for witches, pirates, bootleggers, sex workers, and monsters. It is seen as mysterious and dangerous by American culture at large, but why is this? First, there are the legends. This is the subject of the next video, but needless to say, the Pine Barrens has weird vibes, and a lot of weird stories. Second, we need to ask the question, who is telling these stories? And who are they being told about? Appalachia was originally settled by American Indian nations like the Cherokee and Shawnee. Then British and French colonists came in, along with groups that they had displaced, like the Lenape. After a few decades, they had conquered the region with guns, germs, and the city of Pittsburgh. The people who settled Appalachia didn't keep many slaves, and as a result, the region became a refuge for escaped slaves along the Underground Railroad. The escaped slaves, as well as newly arrived immigrants, took up dangerous jobs to survive, as the rocky soil was difficult to farm on. While the culture and geography may be different, a similar story was being told about the hillbillies as it was about the Pineys. The wealthy people who owned the mines and mills told stories to their rich friends back east to demonize the working class. In the 18th century, white residents, by 18th century standards, were being accused of intermixing with non-white residents, again by 18th century standards, solely for the crime of being abolitionist. So, yeah, this is where the video gets dark, and I'll try to keep it as YouTube friendly as possible. 100 years ago, America's political elite became very concerned with the health and moral fiber of its white residents. So they studied groups that they considered to be backwards, including hillbillies, pineys, and other rural and indigenous communities. The popular belief at the time was that, quote-unquote, feeble-mindedness was a result of a moral failing on behalf of the parents, and thus tailored their studies to support these assumptions, to the point of lying and doctoring images. But when you actually look into it, you learn that the quote-unquote promiscuous feeble-minded woman they blamed for causing these mental illnesses was actually a child who was being exploited by grown men. Naturally, these bogus studies were a hit. In the United States and Canada, they were used to justify compulsory sterilization, and in Germany, they were cited by the leaders of the AfD to justify the T4 program. Fast forward to 2025, and there are over 700,000 people living within the federal or state delineated Pine Barrens, or a little over 7% of New Jersey's population. And the biggest threat to Piney culture is actually a perverse assimilation. Pineys, hillbillies, corn shuckers, Ozarkers, and Cajuns are all being overshadowed by country culture. Country is rural as an aesthetic. It's country music and mason jars. It's y'all and big trucks. And a white Protestant conception of God. It sands down the distinctiveness of each of these constituent cultures to sell back to a more willing public. It plays up and fetishizes stereotypes when it can, and downplays the lived experience to make it look great on Etsy. In all seriousness, it's a minor gripe in the grand scheme of things. But as we've seen over the last decade, aesthetics is politics. And it is probably the defining factor of the culture wars. Who is a real piney, just like who is a real hillbilly, is just used to deny people their heritage because they don't fit the mainstream conception of what a piney is.